Hi students, welcome to lecture 1 of 2 in week 1 day 4. We'll be covering the paraphrasing section on your paraphrasing and summarizing content today, and today's lecture 1, would be on paraphrasing, writing the author's idea in your own words. So this is the skill that we'll be covering today. So the reason we use paraphrasing is because we want to hear what you understand from your readings. So if we just read the articles, we're reading the author's words and their idea. But we want to teach you the skill of understanding the author's idea and then writing that in your own words. So here is the skill of paraphrasing, and I'm going to teach you how in this video. There are 5 steps in how you paraphrase, and the first step begins with reading the passage. So as you're following along from day 1 to 4, yesterday we taught you how to read passages, the 4 levels of reading. There are 4 of those. See if you can remember them. And it begins with reading. So again, read the passage word by word. So don't just scan the articles like you do in level, skim the articles like you do in level 2, but actually scan and take notes on it. Again, take notes when you read the passage. In each sentence, you can try to locate the subject, the verb, and the object. Being able to find these, subject, verb, and object, would help you understand and keep the meaning of each sentence as you try to paraphrase them. Having located the subject, verb, and or object in the sentence that you're paraphrasing, it is also important to identify what the author's main idea is. Usually you start with the verb, that somebody wants to do something, and you figure out who is doing it and if they're doing it to something or someone. This helps you understand the author's main point and what they're trying to say. As well, if you're reading paragraphs or articles, and even sometimes in a sentence, there may be key words, like the words in a subject, or words that repeat more than once. Sometimes in articles you have phrases that repeat more than once. So make sure you highlight those or take a note of those, write them down in your Cornell notes when you're reading. Again, the more you write down, the more you work with the articles you're reading, the easier it is when you paraphrase. And finally, the writing part. So after you read and think about what the author is saying, understanding the idea of the author's words and noting the mechanics, the subject, the verb, and the objects, as well as seeing if there are any keywords or important phrases that you should keep in your paraphrase, then you can write down the author's main points, so that's their idea, in your own words. This is the key. Otherwise, if you don't do this, if you're just quoting, unless you explain the quote, I might as well just read the article. I don't need to read your paper. But I want to read your paper because I want to read your paraphrasing skills. Okay? And when you paraphrase, it is important to not change the meaning. So, we're going to show you what that looks like. So one of the ways you can change the words from the author's words into your own words is to use something called synonyms. So these are related words that you can find from a thesaurus. Now your Longman dictionary also includes a thesaurus that you can use to check different words as well. So make sure you can open that and try using the thesaurus in paraphrasing this sentence. So we have an example of the original here. And then we have sort of your first paraphrase example. Okay. So using synonyms, you're changing the author's words, into your words. All right. Let's read the author's sentence. Overuse of groundwater would lead to pervasive drought. And the person who wrote it is Bueller, one of my colleagues, an instructor who teaches 099, and she wrote it in 2010. That's the citing thing. You don't need to paraphrase those, but you do need to keep them. So notice that in your original and in your paraphrase, you keep the citation stuff, the information. Who wrote it? So this is the who and when they wrote this, when they wrote the sentence. Okay, so compare the author's words, overuse of groundwater would lead to pervasive drought, to this example here of your paraphrase. The excessive use of groundwater would cause widespread dryness. So what I'm going to get you to do is compare these sentences. You can pause this video and try to circle words that are different and underline words that are the same. Let me take a moment and do this now. See, which words are different? Well, let's take a look. We have overuse and the excessive use. Those are different. Okay, lead and cause. That's different. Lead to, actually, and cause. Widespread and pervasive. That's different. Drought and dryness. So the words that are the same, however, are of groundwater would. So that part is the same. Remember, you can also try and identify the subject, verb, and object in sentences like this. So, for example, here you have the subject, overuse of groundwater. Notice that in the paraphrase there is also a subject, which is very much the same. The excessive use of groundwater. That's your subject. Okay, would lead to, so there's your verb. And here would be would cause, there's your verb there. Widespread drought. Pervasive drought, that's your object. Widespread dryness, that's your object. So when you break down the author's sentence into its components, subject, verb, and object. You would see that none of the key components, subject, verb, and object, is missing in your paraphrase. So they're the same. Subject with subject, verb with verb, object with object. So the synonyms, they change the words in the subject, verb, or object in the sentence, but it does not change the structure of the sentence yet. Or at least it doesn't take away any of the key parts. Okay, so the synonyms used is overuse, and that becomes excessive use. Lead to would be cause, and pervasive would be widespread. Drought would be dryness. So you can pause this video and try it out. go to the Longman dictionary, maybe try this word like overuse and see what synonyms you can find. And then once you've done that, try the next word, lead to or lead. And then pervasive, and see if you can get widespread, and drought, and see if you can get dryness. After that, you can move on to the next slide. Sometimes changing the words may not be enough, and you might want to change the structure of a sentence. Changing the structure of a sentence would help you, let's say, when you are writing a bigger summary or an essay, that you want to add variety in your sentences. One of the ways to add variety in your sentences is to change the structure. And when you change the structure, this means you can change the clause, you can change the voice, or you can use different word forms. Here's what it looks like. Here's the sentence that you started with in your first paraphrase. So this is paraphrase 1. So it reads the same. The excessive use of groundwater would cause widespread dryness. Remember to still cite the author, because this is their idea, not yours. Okay, so you see the citation here as well. Okay, just a note, when you're writing a summary for this week's assignment, we should know which article you're using, and you can practice this. Practice this citation. Let us know who wrote the article and when they wrote it. Oh, and if there's no date, write N.D. No date. Alright, back to the paraphrase. Compare this with the new sentence structure. It reads, because of the excessive use of groundwater, widespread dryness would be caused. Okay, take a moment and circle any words that you see that are different and underline any words that are the same. You can pause this video and try it out now. Okay, let's take a look. Excessive use, the excessive use, those are the same. Of groundwater, that's the same too. Widespread dryness, that's the same. This would, I would circle that. However, take a look at this. Here we have would cause in your paraphrase 1, and in paraphrase 2, your second time paraphrasing this sentence, would cause becomes would be caused. And take a look at why we change the would cause in paraphrase 1 into would be caused in paraphrase 2. Remember, this change in word form, in this case a verb form, it's also a change in voice. And when the voice changes, take a look at what happens. Notice the verb comes before the object here, object being widespread dryness. The object in paraphrase 2 is comes before the verb, would be caused. Okay, and because the object is placed before the verb, you need to change the clause. That's why you have because of here. Notice in paraphrase 1, it does not have because of, it's missing. You've actually added that in there. Why? Because this is a passive voice sentence, and here is an active voice sentence. Remember, if you want to keep your voice consistent between sentences, you may need to practice this skill. If the sentence before this is an active sentence, and the sentence you're paraphrasing happens to be in the passive voice, you may need to switch the voice when you paraphrase it. Like in this case, we're switching from an active voice sentence to a passive one. And so we need to change the order of your subject, verb, and object. And you need to make a clause for the sentence to work grammatically. Here, because widespread dryness would be caused, well, why? It's because of the excessive use of groundwater. And here is now the first clause becomes a reason, and you actually you made a new clause here. This is what's happening. Take a moment and try it out. When you change the voice, you're going to need to add in more words. You're going to need to break the sentences down into different clauses. Here, in your paraphrase 1, there's only one sentence, no commas, just one clause. When you change to a passive voice, most often you'll end up with two clauses, a comma here, and then you need to add connecting words to make one clause the main clause, and then your other clause the dependent one. Widespread dryness would be caused because of the excessive use of groundwater. Just a note, if you want to paraphrase this one more time, which we will do in the next slide, I've just said it. Instead of saying because of the excessive use of groundwater, you could say widespread dryness would be caused. So I'm putting this object and the verb first this time, because of the excessive use of groundwater. Okay? So that would be sort of paraphrase free. If I wanted to paraphrase it one more time. So try it yourself. See if you can use synonyms and change the voice in your second paraphrase. Moving on. Well, what I've just talked about in the previous slide on paraphrase free is the next slide. You can even change the order of the clauses. So here is paraphrase 2, and the sentence underneath it is paraphrase free. This is your third time paraphrasing the same sentence. And what happened here is the order of the clauses has changed. Let's read the paraphrase 2 one more time. Because of the overuse of groundwater, so you have because of there, widespread dryness would be caused. Take a look at paraphrase 2, the same order, and compare it with paraphrase 3, the new order. Circle any words that are different and underline any words that are the same. You can pause this video to give this a try now. Okay, let's take a look. Because of and by. That's the first change. And then the order has changed. Notice the excessive use of groundwater or the overuse of groundwater. So you have a synonym there. That's another change. This time. Groundwater is the same of groundwater. Notice that this big chunk, this clause that is placed first in paraphrase 2 is now switched. So you have clause 1. Okay. The subordinate clause. This is first. And then you have clause 2. This time, you have clause 2 first. Clause being a part of the sentence as meaning. And then see, widespread dryness would be cause. That's clause is stayed the same throughout. Notice that if you change the order of the clauses, you would need to change the connecting word as well. Because of is usually used at the beginning of a sentence. At least in this case it is. When you put the subordinate clause in the end of a sentence, you might need to change the connecting word. Here, because of is changed to by. So the sentence reads, widespread dryness would be caused by the excessive use of groundwater. You could read, widespread dryness would be caused because of the excessive use of groundwater, but by is cleaner. It's simpler and it's a better flow to the sentence. So having a vocabulary of connecting words and practicing word order and practicing subordinate and main clauses in your paraphrasing is very useful. So it gives you more variety when you are writing the author's words in your own words. So in the end, we have paraphrased 3 times. So let's compare the original sentence with your final paraphrase. Here we have the original sentence, which you notice is a quote because it is the author's idea and the author's words. So here it's and. So again, it's not your words. You can find it in the article. Sometimes quotes are useful if every word in the author's article you need to use and you need to look at and explain. That's when you want to quote. Otherwise, when you're paraphrasing or summarizing somebody else's idea, you can write it in your own words. This way, it will help you organize your essay and or summary. Now let's take a look at the paraphrase. According to the climate change expert, Ms. Bueller, widespread dryness would be caused by the excessive use of groundwater. So we'll take a look at the according to climate change expert Ms. Bueller part later. But notice this next part, widespread dryness would be caused by the excessive use of groundwater. This is your paraphrase 3. You could put in paraphrase 2 or paraphrase 1 in there. That works too. But using this skill, you can practice paraphrasing more than once and choose the best kind of paraphrase for you. Now, on to the part where we see an addition to the paraphrase. According to climate change expert Ms. Bueller, so notice the difference here. I'm going to give you a second to see if you notice what's different in the citation. Do you see it? So instead of putting Bueller in the brackets along with the year, so this is your who, this is your when. Oh, this is in brackets like this, and that's how you do it in APA. Here you only see the when, in this case the year. The who is now placed in the middle of a sentence, and the signal word for this is according to. So it's kind of like saying Ms. Bueller says widespread dryness would be caused by the excessive use of groundwater. According to, as a signal word, allows you to use a paraphrase. When you use Ms. Bueller says, for example, you might end up using a quote. So, because when you say somebody says something, you're expecting to hear their words. So you can also say said. Same thing. in each sentence that you cite, you need to include the who and the when. So you can either do this in one bracket, have the who, this is the last name, the family name of the author, or the first word of the title, and the year. Or you can put the who in part of the sentence, like this, and put the when in the bracket. More information on this you can find in the APA citation guide, which we'll cover as well. For now, we're focusing on the paraphrasing skill. So you have the signal word according to who? Well, Bueller. She happens to be a climate change expert. This is added just for detail and for clarity. But the important thing is you have a signal word and who. And then the paraphrase itself. And remember, the big difference between the paraphrase and the quote is the quotation marks. When you see quotation marks, that's a quote. And that's the author's words and the author's idea. When you paraphrase, it is the author's idea, but your words. Both of these, notice, is the author's idea. They're not your idea, which means you need to cite it. So this is your citation. Citation. And citations include always whose idea, and when. So make sure you include both of these in your citations for every sentence that you are talking about the author's idea. And in your summary, that's basically every sentence. Okay, so that's it for lecture 1. Stay tuned for the next lecture, which is teaching you how to summarize.